Hey guys, if you want to become a better archer, better bow hunter, you've came to the right place. I'm Levi Morgan, this is Bow Life Boot Camp, and we're about to dive into everything archery. To see or not to see? That is the question. But for real, that is the question. This one maybe not for everybody as far as target panic goes, but is definitely for everybody as far as archery and bow hunting and competing in general and just shooting a bow goes. And it could be the 100% cause and cure of your target panic because there are so many different forms. This was a big one for me, and it's something I struggle with all the time, have to keep changing as my eyes keep changing. So when you're shooting a bow, whether you're hunting or competing, there are certain things you want to see, and there are times that you can see way too much, and there's things you don't want to see. So I tried to put some up here. What I want to see all the time, no matter what, is clarity. I want to see clearly. I want to see whether I'm talking about my pin, if I'm shooting a dot, whatever I'm talking about, I want to be able to see a crisp, clear pin or dot, as well as a crisp and clear target. I hear a lot of times people say, I can get my target clear, but my pin's blurry, or I see double pins, and sometimes that's not an option. Like Samantha has something wrong with her eyes, and she just cannot get a crystal clear picture of both. You want to get the best you can possibly get. It took me a while, but I have what I now consider a crisp pin and a crisp target. So that is 100% what I want to see. On the other hand of that, what I don't want to see is a blurry target that's unclear, a blurry pin, kind of washed out dot. Those are things I don't want to see. This can happen with your peep too. So if you shoot a huge peep, just a gigantor peep, it's going to let a ton of light in. You're going to be able to see a ton, but at the same time, you're going to be able to see a lot around your housing of your scope where your pins are at. It's going to be harder to center, not going to be a good thing. But there's a lot of different housings. This is a 29. It's a very small housing in my opinion, and I'd never shoot a housing this small. I do not like a housing that small because it makes me claustrophobic. It constricts my vision. This is a 35. This is what I shoot most of the time for competing. I've even shot a 42 millimeter before. But the main thing is finding a peep at your draw length, and it's going to be different for everybody. There is no magic formula, that you can see the housing of your scope or your pins, but you can't see around it. And even worse, you can't see the housing at all. That is a no-no, to have a peep so small that you cannot see the housing of your scope, because then it makes it very hard to center everything subconsciously. You don't want to be consciously trying to say, oh, I got to center that, put that there, do this, because that's taking forever in your shot sequence while you're at full draw, when you should be acquiring the target quickly, like we talked about in the last lesson. So all these things should just happen. They should fall into place, and making that easier is where your peep housing barely lets you see your scope housing at full draw. Enough to be accurate is what I want to see. I want to see enough to be accurate. Now I'm talking about my pin on the dot. So if I'm shooting indoors, shooting a Vegas face, 3D, hunting, whatever, I have been very guilty of trying to shoot this tiny little, and I still shoot one, a 10 thou fiber, dimmed way down, I'll show you, way down to where you can barely see it. Why? Because when I'm aiming very well at home practicing, I can shoot incredibly accurate with a tiny, tiny pin. But as you get nervous, the smaller your pin is, the more movement that shows up. And so when I'm shooting indoors or 3D, and I can see the baby X around my tiny little dot, or I can see the 12 ring around my tiny little dot, and my dot is moving, it looks like it's doing this right here, I freeze. It causes me to panic. It causes me to lock up, and then I have to almost say, it's time to shoot now, or you're never going to shoot your arrow. So that's why it's so important in those situations to either have a light like I do, where you can really turn that fiber way up bright, and as it gets brighter, it gets bigger, so I cover up more. I can't see my movement near as much. calms my mind down, allows me to make a clean executed shot through the movement, executing through it. On the same thing, if you shoot a crazy powerful lens, does the same thing. Think about when you're shooting a rifle scope and you jack the power up to 9 and try to aim it steady. It shows up your movement so much, which is actually more than the actual movement itself. So I try to stay, I won more tournaments in my life shooting no lens and a 10 thou up pin bright. And just because it's more important to execute properly than it is to see exactly minutely what you're aiming at. So what I shoot now is a 4-power lens with an A clarifier in my peep when I'm competing. Obviously when I hunt, I shoot no lens. I don't want to see all that. When I hunt, I don't need to be able to see the 12 ring when I hunt because there isn't one. So I shoot a 4-power lens on a 35 millimeter scope housing competing, and I shoot the A clarifier from Hamsky because it's missing. That's where it goes. And that really clears the pin and the target up for me. And I shoot my fiber and I'll change it situationally. And I would suggest everybody and encourage everybody to get some kind of light that allows you to really fine tune your pin brightness and size. Maybe you got to go to a 19, maybe you go to a 29, maybe indoors. A lot of the best indoor shooters cover up almost the entire yellow with their dot because it eases their mind. They get a bad hole started, they don't have to look at it the whole time and cause that anxiety. So there's a lot of things you want to see, but then there's things you can see way too much. So there's a fine line. You want to see enough to be accurate, and that's the key, and no more. There is no reason if you're shooting arrows touching each other at 50 yards to go to a smaller pin. It's going to cause more anxiety, more target panic. So this is more about the visual side of target panic. It's more about shooting, you know, I've been in situations where I had too small a peep that didn't let in enough light and my pin was so small and I'm fighting, trying to see the entire time. And then I see it for a second and I think in my subconscious, I have to shoot now because I've been fighting to find my pin for the last 10 seconds. So it's very important to have clarity, but to not be able to see so much that your movement looks more than it actually is. So it's all about easing your mind and seeing enough to be accurate. That might be confusing, but I think if you rewatch this a couple times, go out, play around with some of your dot sizes, pin sizes, brightness. There is gonna be that money setup for you when it comes to lenses, pin sizes, brightness, peep sizes. All these things make such a big difference in the piece you have at full draw. So see enough to be accurate, and it's going to make you a better archer. Hopefully ease your mind, maybe cure your target panic.